Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We are going to be talking about just kind of an intro to marketing analytics and how we can start learning how to make data-driven marketing decisions. So I'm Rachel Majors. I'm the digital marketing consultant at ASBTDC, the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center in Fayetteville through the University of Arkansas. So just a little bit about us. Our centers were throughout the state, but we provide all types of consulting services for-profit businesses throughout the area. So our Fayetteville office services 6 surrounding counties. But if you are outside of our Northwest Arkansas area, we also have some centers throughout the state. So but yeah, you can get consulting services throughout finances, marketing, brand positioning, startup, truly anything. We have great market research capabilities. Yeah, just reach out to us and visit us at sbtdc.uark.edu to get started. Oops. Just a little bit about me before we jump into the business of it all. I was born here, came back for school, and it has always been home. So I love Fayetteville, and I feel really lucky to be able to work with businesses like all of you, and be able to kind of serve my community through that way. So outside of work, I love being outside, riding bikes with my husband, and hanging out with our dogs. So professionally, I've always had a background in digital marketing, content marketing, and kind of always stayed in the back end, like SEO analytics side of it. So started in influencer marketing, moved to supply chain marketing, freelance for a while, owning different B2C, B2B accounts. And then now I kind of have a hybrid of consulting and then B2B marketing through brokerage. So, but a lot of my focus has always been kind of digging into those gears in the background. What can we do to optimize our marketing efforts? What can we learn from them? And then really focusing mostly on organic tactics. I am a true believer that there's so many things you can do organically to grow your marketing efforts and your business that a lot of the times can be ignored. So yeah, if you ever take any of my other courses, I kind of hit along all of these, but most of the time, all things are free tactics and trying to give you a framework of how to think about things from an analytics and data perspective. So marketing analytics, why should we care and how can we simplify? Even as I was putting together this presentation, I was like, there are endless metrics, there are endless possibilities for analytics that we can track and pay attention to. And today I really want to focus on the ones that matter for small businesses. You can always scale up, but the goal is to understand what's going on in our business, to understand if our marketing efforts that we're spending a lot of time, energy, possibly money, time and resources are, cost money as well. So even if we're doing free organic tactics, there's always some type of investment involved. And we want to have an understanding that what we're doing actually has an impact. If it doesn't, we don't know how to evolve our marketing efforts. We don't know how to adapt our strategies. So if there are a few simple metrics we can look at every month, every quarter, look at them year over year, we can really start to gain an understanding of what impacts our marketing, what our customers and potential customers care about, and what is, driving results for us. So today's agenda is just kind of general overview of the importance of marketing analytics, a few best practices, brief touch on marketing qualified leads, platform metrics, and when to adjust. So kind of pick the 4 main ones that I go through with clients that I get asked about the most. So we'll look at email marketing, social media as it relates to Facebook and Instagram, but we can also discuss LinkedIn and other channels, Google Business, and your website. We'll look at monthly and quarterly analytics and metrics that we can keep track of to have an understanding of our business impact, and then a few simple examples of tracking templates and that you can build for yourself to keep track of these metrics. So the importance of marketing analytics overall is to know what is normal for your business across platforms and across channels where you're putting in effort. Having a baseline benchmarking a lot, but knowing what to expect from your current marketing is really important as we start looking forward and back from a historical perspective to understand when something is overperforming, we need to go look at that and see what's causing that. If something is underperforming, we need to understand what's causing that too. So if we don't know what is normal benchmark for us, it's really hard to tell when something's spiking or dipping. So that's a big part of it. You will hear me say that a lot during this presentation if you ever work with me. A big passion is creating benchmarks. Next is focusing on trends over time and truly understanding how to gather insights versus just looking at flat numbers and only focusing on daily fluctuations. You will always have fluctuations in your marketing analytics, as you do in sales, as you do in everything in business. But having that platform, benchmark, that perspective, and then understanding, you will start finding trends for your business that are normal. And when you start seeing trends that aren't normal, we have the power to evaluate whether that's positive or negative, and we might need to adjust. And then understanding how to use metrics to make decisions versus collecting data. So kind of that insights that I just spoke on. But if we're only ever looking at numbers, we can't tell much from that. We really have to dig in and kind of have this 360 perspective of our marketing efforts and our business to understand true impact. Numbers are great, and I encourage everyone to keep track of numbers, but without, kind of that framework of thought and evaluation, it's not going to tell you much. And then just knowing when to adjust your strategy in your content plan. So throughout some of this, you might start thinking like, wow, I'm spending a lot of time on Facebook or in email marketing. And when I look at the data, it's actually not impacting my, marketing or sales in the way that I thought it was. So that might be, go back, evaluate that, look at some of these strategies that we talk about today and really start measuring that lasting impact. And the adjustments are important. They should never be instantaneous. Like I had one bad email open rate to change everything. It really is about building perspective and expectations per platform and understanding what you're trying to get out of Instagram email. Sometimes it's just an awareness play, and that's great. Sometimes if you're needing to make real sales impact, you're relying on that as a sales referral channel, then you're going to have different expectations and you might make adjustments that way. So that's some of what we'll talk about throughout this presentation. So a few just overall best practices, we never want to track too many metrics. If every platform that you're looking at will give you, it can be anywhere from 10 to 20 to 50. Google Analytics can feel endless sometimes. So we want to understand what matters for us to have an understanding of our actual marketing efforts. And we'll dig into some key metrics throughout this, but if we're tracking too many things, most of the time that data is there if we ever need to go back to it. But if we're trying to pay attention to 15 metrics per platform, one, it's overwhelming. We're never going to actually want to go dig into that data. And two, it's not usually an effective use of time to try to pay attention to all of the things all of the time. And then we never want, like we were just talking about, never want to change strategies too frequently. It's hard to tell when something is working if we're changing something all of the time. So it's good to be aware of it. It's good to not lean into something for 6 months that we know is not working, but we do need a little time, and consumers need a little time to react to change and to take a general understanding of your marketing efforts. And we never want to ignore seasonal patterns. So you will see throughout your business, and it really depends on your industry, but this is where it's really important to have those benchmarks. So I work with a company where, sometimes or I've worked with several companies where summer can kind of hit a slump. And so if we know over time that we expect July to be lower because that's what we've seen in years past, then it's not as surprising and shocking to us when we get to July in the next year, we're not freaking out because we see our metrics going down. We know that's normal for us. And we can start to prepare for that too in the coming months, heading up. If we know months are slower, then we can start to prepare for that in our marketing efforts as well. And then vanity metrics, certain things can look really good, really high, but what does it actually mean for our business? So again, going back to that impact where, okay, 40,000 impressions might seem great, but what does that really do for us over time? What's the expectation there? And then again, back to benchmarks. Set your benchmarks. We never want to neglect those. And then we always want to focus on actionable metrics, set realistic goals, which we'll talk about towards the end of the presentation, account for seasonality, and then test and measure systematically in a system that makes sense for you, that you're building internally with your team, that feels attainable, that you want to go pay attention to. It feels exciting to actually look at your metrics and know what's going on in your marketing channels. And then documenting what works. So we're always working fast paced. A lot of us work by ourselves or we have a very small team. So it is fun too to be able to prove those wins to yourself and kind of give you that gas to keep going when you're juggling so many things at once. So I think that I know not a lot of people get very excited about marketing analytics, but I do because it really can teach you so much and kind of create some inspiration for your team, I think. And I feel like that feedback loop is always really important as we're growing our small businesses. This is just quick. I wanted to put this in here because it's not technically a platform metric that we would be looking at through our email, marketing, social media website, the things that we're talking about today. But this is something that is an very normal metric for a lot of businesses to track, and that's marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. You'll often hear these terms more in service-based businesses, which tend to be more B2B. But basically, overall, a marketing qualified lead is a lead who's engaged with your company and could be a customer eventually. So most of the time, MQLs need to be nurtured a bit more, which you can have an MQL, even in like your online e-commerce. If we're seeing people come in, they're shopping, we can see them spending time, they add something to their cart, and we see that add to cart drop. That can kind of be the more B2C version of an MQL that might need a little bit nurturing. That's where email marketing comes into play. And then a sales qualified lead, they've been vetted by a marketing, they're ready to talk to sales. So that's where that starts feeling more like a service level metric, but wanted to include that. But yeah, if this relates to you and this is something that you're tracking, I do think it's important to understand the source of your marketing leads. Are they coming mainly from social media, organic search, referrals? Some businesses have a huge referral-based network. So we want to track that because we want to know what's working. If we know what's working to drive leads, then we can often know how to lean into that. We might actually start spending dollars in that, investing in that. So kind of that loop of knowing where people are coming from, knowing where to make investments. And then most of the time, as we look at MQL sources, we want to be able to keep track of that and have an understanding of it. So maybe every month we're tracking the physical number of MQLs and SQLs, but then we also need to know where they're coming from. And so a lot of the time, if you're using like a CRM, it will track your sources. It will say this lead was generated from organic search or, LinkedIn. It will track a lot of that if you have certain like plugins and stuff on your site. But most of the time, a common action for MQLs in our situations are a form submission, they're requesting more information, signing up for a newsletter, a lead magnet, content download, they've attended a webinar you hosted, an add to cart or abandoned cart, an outreach email. They are emailing you saying, hey, I'm interested in learning more about your business or services. And then most of the time, leads are kind of coming from your general marketing channels, right? So organic search, social media, those third-party referrals, any advertising channels or efforts that you're making, anything you're kind of putting out, and where people can find you can kind of be a source for those MQLs. So digging into email marketing, a few metrics that we would want to track are our open rate and our click rate. So I included just some general averages. These are going to change per industry. So I really encourage you to do some research on what is normal for your industry. And then we always want to keep in mind with our email marketing that the intent of the content and copy in our email marketing is going to impact these metrics. So say that we have like a very general informational email, we're going to see a very low, with no links to click out on. Since there's nothing anyone can click, we're going to see a very low click rate in that email because we didn't give them anything to click on. So I think that's always good to understand. If that's something that you want to write down in your email marketing, that's something that you want to build into your tracker, having that expectation for your business click rate might not always be a metric that is important. We can watch it, but it might not be driving that impact. If you are trying to drive sales, you're in e-commerce, you're sending sales emails that you need people to click on to go to your website and buy something. We do want to pay attention to click rate because we need them to click out to buy. So if we're seeing really low click rate in that example, that would be a red flag for us, and we would need to reconsider some of our marketing efforts. On the next slide, I have some of this too, but things that impact open rate, our subject line, our preview text, our historical email content, basically. So do people find our emails valuable? Do they want to continue to open them? And I think a lot of the times I talk to people are like, are emails still relative? And I know that we all get so many emails, but it is really a channel that if you own it and you do it well, you can create a connection with your customers and potential customers that keep them coming back and engaged. And that comes with great content, that comes with great planning, not overloading people with too many sins. And overall in marketing, if we're creating value for the customer and prospect, normally they will keep opening. So I know this is a text heavy slide, but I also want you guys to kind of have the talk track when I send the deck to you later. So when to take action. This is kind of the value of understanding our marketing efforts, right? If we know what's normal, then we kind of know what the action is if we start to see something abnormal. So if you're finding that your open rates are dropping, a few things we can do are testing different subject lines, adjust your sending time, clean up your email list. So maybe you're sending to people who are not relative to your business anymore. If you purchased a business before and you've kind of changed something, you might find that you have a different customer base or something's not resonating with your current list. So maybe we need to go acquire new subscribers from a newsletter sign-up campaign or something like that. And then we always want to segment our audience and evaluate our list. So a lot of the times, if our emails are too broad, the open rate can be lower or the action rate can be lower as well, like a click-through rate, because we're sending it to so broad of people. If we can send emails that are like action-based, so we know that this customer, like through Shopify, is looking at these categories on our website, we're using things to track them, we can send them a very targeted email that speaks to what they've been looking at and what we know that they want, versus just sending that email to everyone who doesn't have the same website behavior, doesn't have the same, they're not valuing the same things. So, and then we never want to send more emails to compensate. If people are not already opening, sending more and more and more is usually not going to make them want to open more. If your click rates are low, again, we would need to have that lens of, am I expecting people to click? Do I need them to click? What is the intent of your email? But if you do need people to click and that's not happening, it's always a good idea to kind of play with some of the formatting. Think of like kind of that visual funnel of people. You have the most attention at the top, and then it kind of starts to go down further down the email that you get. So you can move your key content higher in the email, make your CTAs more prominent, use action button text. So buy now, learn more. Click here, like tell people what you want them to do and what they will be getting when they do that. And then reducing the number of links. If people, it can be overwhelming to be marketed to as well. As business owners, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. As a shopper, as a customer, it is too. Like think about all the ways that you're marketed to by how many businesses. So more is not always better in this case, but the value is going to be better. So understand what's important to your customer or that prospect and start to evaluate your emails that way to make it a resource that doesn't feel overwhelming, that feels helpful and easy to interact with. And then we don't want to add too much flashy stuff. So still going back to that value, we love, you know, beautiful images, things that provide a visual value aspect, keeps you entertained and engaged, but we don't need to just like overwhelm with, you know, flashy GIFs or videos or something to try to grab attention, I think, overall. If your unsubscribe spike, review any content changes that you've made, check your email frequency. If you're sending too much, people might unsubscribe. I unsubscribed to something this morning because it's not relevant to me anymore, and they're sending me an email every single day. If you feel that it's time to survey your remaining subscribers, you can do something like that of, hey, we want to get an understanding of what you want from this email. If it's a newsletter, business, you know, tell us what is important to you. What would you like to see more of? I also think, you know, kind of in that same vein, evaluating your current list. So again, back to that open rate, but if you're getting a lot of unsubscribes, that could be a sign too, your list is not actually built up of your, you know, ideal customers or subscribers. So that's always good to look at. And then, you know, analyze which email is triggering those unsubscribes. You might start seeing trends of a certain type of content, a certain type of theme, language that starts to trigger more unsubscribes. Another thing to pay attention to, and this would be more on bounce rate, I guess, than unsubscribes. If you have a large bounce rate for your emails, that's where we want to start checking our spam policies and best practices, which is what I've included at the bottom. Email providers kind of have this checklist of what makes a good email that they will let into their customers' inbox, you know? And so a few things that can trigger spam filters and cause bounces are large format images. So we never want to put anything in that megabyte range of in an email. It's really heavy and it can look like spam to filters. So always make sure you're using small format images. Think more in that like web format sizing. So KBs, not MBs is kind of my rule. And then you never want to embed videos directly into your email. We can use a link or something like Vimeo or YouTube to host it externally. Some CRMs do have video file capabilities that are fine in their email systems. It will just depend. But basically, videos are really heavy, and a lot of email providers know that, you know, video links and more things that you can click are sometimes not always secure. So that's just like an automated red flag that can happen sometimes. We always want to ensure that all recipients have opted in. So you know, an email carrier can basically say you're spam if they think that you're marketing to someone that hasn't actually opted in to get your content. So we always want to make sure that we're only sending to people who have agreed to receive our content, and then always use a reputable email carrier and platform. So something, you know, through Shopify, through your website platform is great, through your POS, depending on what you're using, MailChimp, Constant Contact, HubSpot, lots of options there, but something like that versus using just a personal Gmail to send a newsletter or something, that is often going to get flagged and your email might not ever get through. And there's really no way of tracking through just a personal email. So then we lose our marketing analytics, but a few email kind of watch outs strategy. We don't have to get into this much, but these are just a few different formats of emails that I was kind of talking about. Of each of these might have different expectations for your marketing efforts that we would want to be aware of based on the intent of the content. And just this is kind of a data example that you could get through an email carrier. So over on the left, we can see our time sent, which is something that we want to pay attention to. This looks pretty equal between, historically, we can start seeing that most of the time we have a 40% or higher open rate, and our subscriber base is pretty loyal. So it's not mattering too much what time we send. That's not the case for all businesses. I've seen a lot where the open rates can be significantly higher in the morning or in the afternoon. There's a lot of different strategies of like try to be in someone's inbox if they're going to check it when they wake up at 8 a.m. or whatever. So those are good things to test. It's always a good idea to test one thing at a time, or we can't get accurate metrics of what's working. So if you're going to try a certain send time to see what is impacting those open rates, focus on send time for one email. Don't, change the send time, the subject line, the preview text. Don't change everything at one time, or it's really hard to pinpoint what's actually working. Clicks. This October 28th was an email that it was completely informational, a flyer type situation. There wasn't anything for anyone to click on, so I'm not worried about this 0% click rate. We didn't give anyone an opportunity to click. Our bounces, again, that's just something that clean up your list. It's going to happen. People will sign up with a certain email that doesn't exist anymore. I think that as long as you're watching it and understanding what's going on, you can always expect bounces and unsubscribes. And then as long as your list continues to grow, you can start to replace those people. Moving into social media metrics, these will kind of range through platforms, but I put a few terms on here that are often thrown out in the marketing world as you're doing your planning. So engagement rate, your total engagements divided by your total followers as a percentage. So that engagement can kind of be, it depends on the platform, but normally it's those likes, comments, saves, sends, anything that people are engaging on will get kind of lumped into that engagement rate, versus just looking at likes, comments, sends independently. It gets looped into that overall rate. Your reach and impressions. So, kind of the eyeballs metric of marketing. How many people are you getting your content in front of? Your click-through rate, so your clicks divided by impressions of the people who are seeing that content that it's getting in front of, how many are clicking or taking it in action. Again, you have to set that expectation for yourself. If a post is informational, you don't give them anything to click on, then your click-through rate is going to be lower. And then conversion rate. Not all companies expect conversions out of their social media posts. And that is just something that you will have to understand and set that expectation for your company. Social media can also kind of serve as that, halo effect of marketing, that reminder marketing. A lot of e-commerce businesses will really rely on social media to make purchases. So understand the impact of social media on your business and be able to understand. Conversion rate also does not always mean purchases. It can mean your expectation for Facebook might be to get people to your website or newsletter signups or something. So set that goal for conversion and set a clear understanding of what you want for it. And then kind of back up from there for your tracking. And then I did want to note that your benchmarks for all metrics will be different and can be different between your organic efforts and your paid content. So a lot of the time, organically, you might see a much higher engagement rate or impressions or click-through rate than your advertising. And so just make sure that you know kind of your industry average and range for advertising efforts for social media. Um, I was just looking at the other day and it's very different per industry and per platform. Also per ad type. So if you're running an impressions-based ad versus a purchase-based ad, you're going to have different metrics and benchmarks there. Okay, so Instagram, a few key metrics that we want to look at, and you do not have to keep track of all of these at one time, but these are normally good indicators on if our content is resonating with our audience and if we're reaching new people and the type of, customers, potential customers that we want to be reaching. I think that's probably one of the biggest things in understanding your metrics for your social media is understanding what's working so that you know where to lean into more. If you're spending too much time on a certain pillar of content that, is just not getting any engagement, then that's probably a good time to reevaluate, and kind of get to know your consumer a little bit better. So by evaluating metrics like reach, impressions, follower growth, engagements per follower or that engagement rate, like we were discussing, um, saves, sales and conversions, if that's something that you're looking for. There's endless metrics that you can look at, but most of the time we want to know, is our content resonating? Do people want to engage with it? Is it serving as something that they want to send to other people? And by creating that benchmark, you will understand when a post is overperforming or underperforming. And then we always want to make sure that our page is growing. So tracking that follower growth. If we're only seeing 10 new followers a month, we might need to update, our marketing efforts to try to get more followers so we have more eyeballs that can kind of lead down into that funnel of hopefully becoming customers. So Instagram, when should we adjust? There's a low engagement rate. We might want to evaluate, when our audience is most active, use more relevant hashtags, increase video content, ask questions in our captions. We don't want to post more frequently. Part of Instagram and another good kind of lens to have for your metrics and insights is understanding that you're also playing this algorithm game. So you're trying to reach customers, but they can't see you unless you're kind of hitting a few of these things for the algorithm too. So the algorithm relies on engagement rate as well. So we do want to work in some of those post tactics that encourage people to want to comment and like it. You'll see, small business owners every once in a while have a post of like, hey, it's really hard being a small business owner on Instagram. It means a lot when you like our posts and bookmark them and comment. We want to create a community that, has engagement, and we want to be able to, interact and value our customers. That is a good little campaign to have every once in a while of just like customers in general see a lot of stuff all the time. I think we have to be reminded too to be a good customer and a good following. If we care about a business, we want to support them, and interacting is a good way to do that. If you're seeing low reach and impressions, we often want to reevaluate our consistency. So again, if Instagram sees that we only post once or twice a month, it's not going to prioritize our content over a creator that posts 3 to 5 times a week that people are able to engage with more. So consistency is really important. Using relevant hashtags, that's kind of Instagram's filing system, and knowing when to serve content to people in that discover area based on what they've been interacting with. And then again, going back to encouraging followers to engage. It's also a good idea to always use stories to broadcast your feed posts. So if you post a reel or content in the feed, always share it to stories. Some customers, just based on their algorithm and followers, will see things in stories that they can go interact with in the feed. If they can click out from the story, they might not see it in the feed for 2 days. They might not ever, based on their engagement with your profile. So all good things to keep in mind. But um, this is just, a quick screenshot of what some of the metrics can look like in Instagram. And so you might want to track how many posts you have per month, how many stories, and then evaluate your content where, okay, this 440 number is sticking out to me. I would want to go look at that post, see what time I posted, what was the content, what hashtags did I use, and try to replicate that going forward. Um, For Facebook, very similar metrics. They're the same platform, basically, through Meta. But again, that idea of understanding how people are interacting and how your content is getting in front of them. And then when to adjust, it will be similar, but if you're struggling with reach, we can vary our content formats, post more native content versus just links or third-party articles or something like that. Encourage interaction and comments, use Facebook groups. I think Facebook groups are a really great way to kind of increase that reach and visibility for your pages. And then sometimes Facebook can get a little neglected as we like Instagram more. Sometimes they're more like visual platforms, but make sure that we're still creating content for Facebook and not just reposting or sharing the same content repeatedly. It is okay to repost content from Instagram to Facebook. You might just find that you need to format a little bit differently for Facebook. Your audience might be a little bit different. You might have a bit of a different age range. So all things that we'd want to consider. If you're seeing low engagement, evaluate that content, use your clear CTAs, and again, encourage that engagement. Go back to why it matters and how it helps you overall. This is just an example of what you would be able to see in the Meta Business platform. So again, like as we were looking in the email marketing, I pay attention to days of the week and times. So like Wednesday around lunch, we had a much higher reach. And you can tell that even just, an hour and a half or so can make a difference. So all good things to pay attention to. Again, go back to that content. What was the copy? Who was interacting with it, that type of thing. Understand, 371 might be really high for your benchmark or your average. And so that's something that we would want to know. We might see that 50 to 60 is normal for us, and that's okay. But if we can evaluate when that spike is hitting, we can learn a lot from that piece of content. Google Business Profile is completely free. I encourage everyone to have one. I have, there are recordings. We have a guide on this too, but this is something I teach a lot about. It's completely free and kind of helps you capture those near me searches for local SEO. Even if you do not have a brick and mortar business, you can have a listing on Google Business. You don't have to ever list your location if you run your business from your home or something like that. So a few things that kind of indicate if our Google business is performing well is our search appearance. Are people, and some of these things is it working well? Some of these things are to have it work well. We need things like reviews and ratings. So encouraging our customers to leave reviews when we know they're happy. Click to call, that's offering a profile where people can find you. They're calling for more information. And then website visits is a really valuable metric. Another metric I really like is you can see how many people ask for directions. And I think that's a huge benefit of Google Business. I use Google Maps all the time. I've lived here 15 years at this point, and I still use Google Maps just to kind of see what's around me, what's new, drive time, your hours. I think it's a really great resource for people. And it's very easy to use. It's often easier to optimize than for SEO and quicker than your website platform. If you're just not seeing a lot of engagement in your Google business, like people aren't clicking out to your website, they're not leaving reviews, they're not getting directions, we might need to check a few things. Updating that business description. So that's your first impression. What do you need to tell people, and use a few keywords to get them interested in learning more about your business. Double check your categories and your service area. So the category is really important. If you're marked as just like a general small business, you're not going to come up if someone is searching for like lunch if you are a restaurant or something. So making sure your categories are relevant to your business, setting the accurate service areas. You can do that by county, city, but that kind of builds out an idea of for Google to understand where to serve your listing to. Make sure your business hours are always updated. Add more photos, post updates when relative. I think weekly is a little much, but it depends on your type of business, I think. If you do have events or something like that, it's always a good idea to add them to Google Business, because then you can show up in that like things to do in Fayetteville this weekend, and Google kind of starts creating that little filing system of your listing and what to serve people related to their searches. Always respond to all reviews, and that's kind of a general rule of comments too throughout social media. That engagement interaction really shows. Even if you have a negative review, it's always good to respond to it, because that shows your level of customer service. And we want to be kind and have, you know, a good attitude about it. But yeah, you can dispute your Google reviews. Google will not always take them down, but I do think showing that level of customer service on the platform is important. This is just a few things for you guys to have later on, a few ways to optimize and keep track of your profile. But here are a few metrics that you can get from the platform. This is just in the little insights button when you're in your profile. Calls, bookings will depend on what type of category you have, and then directions and website clicks. So it's always interesting for me to see, how many people are clicking out from Google Business to the website, and, understand if that's a decent traffic driver for us. For your website, this is probably the heaviest like metric area for analytics, and normally what we will spend the most time on. So for the website, we're normally wanting to know, how many users are coming, how many of those users are new users, how many page views, how much time are they spending on the website, conversion rate. Again, if you have something that can drive sales, then we would be paying attention to sales. If you're more of an informational website, your conversion might be a newsletter sign up or a contact us button or form or something. And then traffic sources. How are people getting to your website? Oftentimes that's through organic search, direct traffic. They know your URL, they're putting it in the search bar. Social media, referrals, maybe someone else's email marketing, word of mouth is hard to track in your website. And, most of the time on a website, if I'm trying to understand word of mouth impact, if I have a checkout form or a contact us form or something, I will say, how did you hear about us? And just have those drop down options. You can have one option to be like from a family or friend, or word of mouth or something like that. But anything you can build into your site to try to understand that impact is really important. And then tracking tools we always want to have. These are all free. Google Analytics 4, if you guys ever used Google Analytics before it changed to 4, it was Universal Analytics. The update with 4, it's been almost 2 years at this point, but it's more engagement based. So you won't see bounce rate anymore. You will see more metrics like engagement rate. And I think it's more simplified way, and you can kind of drill down more into your mediums and sources on what's actually driving impact for your website. So I was a little hesitant about it back in the day, but now I really like it. And it's really insightful. Google Search Console, backing up to Google Analytics, that is free to install. You do not have to look at it every day, but I always advise everyone to have Google Analytics on their website because then you can start gathering that historical data. It's also good to have in addition to your website platform analytics because say that one day you switched off of Squarespace and you moved to Shopify, you would lose the historical metrics. And that would just be a real bummer for those benchmarks that we're all creating. So I like to have both all and running at the same time. In Google Analytics, just plays in the background. It's there when you're ready to go look at it. I like to evaluate website metrics at least once a month. If there's a big promotion or push, or we have a certain launch or something, you're running an advertising campaign, then you might be checking it more frequently to understand impact. But monthly is normally a pretty good idea to understand what's going on. Google Search Console is very important. From a metrics perspective, it will tell you what search queries you're coming up with. So on the left-hand side here would be all the different search queries, and then it gives you an idea of clicks and impressions. So again, we could get that click-through rate of the 3,800 people that see this search query, 625 click. If we feel that that's too low or we want it to be higher, we might need to evaluate our meta titles or descriptions, kind of that first impression of what people get from their Google or web search. Google Search Console is great for analytics. We can understand, where we're being served, those search queries, like how people are actually finding us, what keywords they're putting in. But it's also very important for Google to even know we exist. So if you are unsure, if you have a Google search profile, I would check that. It's free to have, but that kind of registers your site with Google as well. Most websites are, if you've had a developer work with you, they have hopefully, added your sitemap to Google Search Console, but always something to verify. And it's a good platform, again, to check about once a month, just see what's going on if you're seeing any big fluctuation there. Your website platforms analytics are always great, especially if you're running like e-commerce. Shopify and Squarespace, will tell you how many sales you're getting from Instagram, how many sales you're getting from Facebook. They're really good about relating referral traffic to sales. In some ways that can be a little more complicated in Google Analytics. That native platform can be better, which is why I like running them at the same time and paying attention to both. And then Google has something called UTM links, and you can just build them. But that's always really good to have for advertising campaigns, knowing, the direct source and impact of those efforts back to your website. It will just show up as a different source, so that you know like which ad type or ad format is performing better than another one to drive traffic to your website. So again, there's always a lot that we can look at in Google Analytics. But a few areas that we might want to adjust are if we see decreased page traffic, which again we would kind of need to know our benchmark and what's normal for us. Through that, we would want to evaluate our marketing channels and our frequency. So it would make sense if our page traffic has gone down, if we had 50% less marketing efforts in the month where we see that decrease. So sometimes, those red numbers can look really shocking. We also have to pay attention to, I feel like your website metrics probably have the most variability, where, you might see a red number that's like, oh my gosh, July was 15% lower than June. Well, June might have been 40% higher than May. And so that is where we do want to have that year over year quarterly idea in our benchmarking, because if you're coming off a super high month that is not normal for you, then your monthly comparisons are going to look scary. And it's going to be hard to get back there. Again, if I see that 40 I'm seeing 40% higher page views or something in a certain month, then you need to go drill down into what is causing that. So you might see that you have a high referral rate or something. Maybe you were hiring and you had a bunch of people come click on a job listing or something. Understanding those variables for that fluctuation in traffic is so important so that looking forward at the months that that's not expected and that's not normal. And something like a job listing isn't going to drive your sales impact, but that's still important to your business. So I hope that's kind of making sense. Anytime a number looks really dramatic, it's always important to drill down into other metrics to kind of understand what's driving that. Low time spent. So if you're just seeing people come onto the website for 2 seconds and leave, then we need to evaluate why are they leaving. Our site could be slow. We might need to test our site speed, navigation. We might just have a website that is hard to use and people are giving up on it. If your website's not optimized for mobile, that can be a really frustrating experience. Depending on the business, sometimes it's like a 60-40 split between desktop and mobile. For some, it can be more than that. And if you get on and you just have, you're trying to make a web experience for a mobile phone, it can be really frustrating and people just don't want to deal with it on their phone and they will leave. And then, we don't want to add more pop-ups or anything that would make the experience like more frustrating for the user if we're already seeing that they're not spending a lot of time on the site. If you're seeing a low conversion rate, it might be time to simplify forms, add social proof, test different CTAs, or add more direct CTAs. If people don't know the action that you want them to take on your website, they don't know to take it. Improve your page layout, kind of think of that funnel format, how you consume content, even things like bullet points, trying to break up some of that content visually. Most people, and this kind of a rule of SEO of creating readability, most people are skimming. Not a lot of people, unless they're on a blog post, are truly digging into long form content. So our website kind of needs to give those quick hitters and give people the value they need to make a decision pretty quickly in the page. And then we don't want to add more form fields. So we all know that we get to that checkout or we get to that information form and you're willing to fill out a few things, but if we have 20 form fields to fill out, we're probably going to leave, which is going to impact conversion rate. So always a lot to consider, but if we know what's important to us, then we know what to consider and what we can actually focus on, I think, when we're seeing those fluctuations. This screenshot is just an example of user acquisition in Google Analytics. So you can start to see that most of our traffic comes from organic search and then direct, and then under that, it could look something like referral, email marketing, social media, or something like that. Organic search, I always care about tracking because one, I work in SEO, and two, if you're putting a lot of efforts into your search engine optimization, SEO, then you want to know the impact. So, that can take about 4 to 6 to 8 months, depending. And if you're really doing a good job at SEO, you should start to see that impact. But we won't know if that's working if we aren't evaluating our organic search traffic to our website. So again, like your current marketing efforts and understanding and going into your website to see what's working is really important. If you're optimizing all of your pages and then just never checking anything, you've spent all that time and energy and thought planning out something that you might need to tweak again later on. You might need to give a little more time to set in, but we want to know that impact. Okay, I promise we're almost done. So monthly and quarterly metrics that I like to track, and this is pretty simplified. Again, pick and choose what is valuable to you, but I'm always looking at website page views, number of users, and sources. So our sources are that like organic search, direct traffic, referrals, social media. how are people actually coming to us from um, the world. Social media impressions, engagement rate, number of followers. So that's going to tell us how people are interacting, and then how our channels are growing. Our email open and click rates, again, depending on your expectations. MQLs and SQLs if relative. And then I like looking at these monthly, but I like keeping, a running, and I'll show you this in a minute. I keep like a running spreadsheet through the years so that it's really easy if someone asks me like, hey, what does July 2022 look like versus July 2024? I just have all of that data. I can graph it out. I can tell them a percent change. I can tell them why, because I've been tracking these metrics. I know the insights. I do like a spreadsheet that keeps the pure metrics, and then I normally do like a monthly report where I add more insights on top of that. It depends on your type of business, and if, you're reporting to someone, then that's certain things are going to matter to them more. Um, and then quarterly, I just like having an idea. Most of our businesses, kind of run in quarters. So, comparing the previous quarter and then also looking at Q1 2023 versus Q1 2024. A lot of the times, generally in analytics, just looking at 1 month by itself or 1 week or 1 quarter, anything that you're isolating normally isn't going to give you a lot of insight. We normally want to be comparing it to something else to understand actual impact. So month over month, a monthly metric year over year, something quarterly, and then looking at it year over year. I like to create those ranges and perspective. This is just an example. So if I have that raw data sheet, I'm able to graph whatever I want. So if I were looking at website source month over month for the past, almost 2 years, this would give me an idea of fluctuation. If I see that really high point in about November, December, I might want to go look back and say, okay, well, 6 months before that, did I really go optimize my search appearance? Then I might see that, I had higher rankings in that month or something. So visually, I think graphs are important. It's really easy to just plug in the numbers and then not know what they actually are until you actually chart it out and you can immediately, see those spikes. You can create a tracking sheet. Something like this is really easy. So simplifying those metrics down, just typing it in once a month, set aside an hour or two, go plug your numbers in. And then that gives you an idea. And then normally I have a few different tabs of the different channels and platforms that I'm tracking. And then at the end of the day, we need to set realistic goals for our business. So if, understanding the goal of each channel, your current average metrics for each platform with those benchmarks, and then what feels reasonable to achieve with your resources and time. So most of the time, it's not reasonable to grow our website traffic, 50% year over year. But based on our benchmark and the current traffic that we see, maybe next year we aim for 10%. And through that, we're going to up our marketing efforts by posting on Instagram more frequently, sending a newsletter once a month. Like then you can kind of base from those goals, base back your strategy. Okay, any questions? I have talked at you guys a lot so far. I'll wait a few seconds to see if anything comes through, but I hope this was helpful. I know that it is a lot to go over, but the idea is to create a framework and a thought process that works for you. There's a million different ways to approach your marketing analytics, but as long as you're thinking about it, then I think you're on the right track. I'm seeing raised hands if you want to come off mute and ask a question, or if you want to put it in the chat. But A question about the recording. Yes, the recording will be sent out, and the deck will as well. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you guys. I will close it out now, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a delicious lunch.